The early morning wind swept through the valley, carrying red dust and the dry scent of dead grass. Elias Ward tightened the reins, his silver-gray eyes narrowing beneath deep-set lines as his grandfather's old wooden cabin came into view, abandoned for years. The bank had taken the ranch. The cattle were all gone. Everything his family once owned had vanished, everything, except this cabin, where he used to run and play as a boy. He had expected dust-covered floorboards and weeds growing through the steps. But what stood before Elias now was a sight so grim it stole the breath from his lungs. 6 Apache women hung limp from the wooden gate.
Joe.
Their dresses were torn and fluttering in the wind, bare feet swinging cold in the air, hair draped over faces bruised and purple from tight ropes. Burned into crude wooden boards nailed across their chests were the words, "This is Morrison's land." His horse reared, neighing in terror, backing away from the stench of death. Elias clenched his jaw. Around these parts, from saloon whispers to the stagecoach stop outside town, everyone muttered the same thing. "Cross Morrison, and you'll pay for it in blood." Now, the proof was swaying right in front of his childhood home. But then, Elias saw it. A faint twitch in the finger of a dark-haired woman. A sharp, shallow breath, barely more than a dying ember. Some of them were still alive. He dropped from the saddle, his boots landing heavy on the cold dirt. His rough, calloused hand trembled as it reached for the rope. Elias knew exactly what it meant cutting that rope would cost him. Morrison would not forgive this. Now, if it were you, would you choose to save these women? Let me know in the comments. The blade in Elias's hand flashed as he slashed through the rope. The limp body dropped, and he rushed to catch it. The woman's form was feather-light, cold as if pulled from a grave, yet a faint pulse still beat at her neck. He laid her gently on the ground, then moved quickly to the others. One by one, he cut them down. 6 broken bodies now lay stretched out before the cabin gate. Their breaths were thin, barely clinging to the air. Elias dragged each woman to the porch. The wooden door creaked open. Inside, the old cabin left behind by his grandfather was thick with dust, cobwebs strung across every corner. Only 4 faded walls and the scent of rotting wood remained. And yet, in that moment, it became a sanctuary for 6 lives trembling on the edge of death. Elias lit a fire. The flame flickered weakly at first, casting a soft glow over exhausted faces. These were not nameless women. Each one carried a story, a strength all her own. The first, Nara, had long black hair and sharp eyes, even though her eyelids drooped with fatigue. A deep cut scarred her cheek, evidence of cruelty endured, but her gaze still burned like hot coals. Beside her was Ayelen, the youngest, frail in frame, her hand gently clutched to her chest. Though her breath came in painful gasps, her wide eyes still held life fragile, but unyielding. Next came Tala, tall and broad-shouldered. She had clearly taken the worst of the beatings, but there was power in her presence, a quiet, grounded strength, like a pillar that refused to fall. Wien sat propped against the wall, her eyes deep and calm. Her posture was unmistakable. This was a woman of wisdom and composure, even as her body trembled. Then there was Ahioka, the eldest. Her hair was streaked with silver. She tended to the others, adjusting cloth, gently brushing the blood-matted hair from Ayelene's forehead. In the flickering firelight, she looked like a mother watching over her children. Last was Kiona, her hair a rare red, her eyes burning blue. Though her lips were cracked and blood clung to the corners of her mouth, a crooked smirk still played there, defiant, daring death itself. Elias sat across from them in silence, watching. In the firelight, his grandfather's voice echoed in memory. "Land ain't just bought with money, Elias. You keep it with blood." Now, the cabin was no longer just a last refuge for a beaten man. It had become a foxhole, and these 6 Apache women, though battered and broken, were flames not yet extinguished. Elias understood. By saving them, he had bound his fate to a road with no way back. The fire crackled softly, its smoke curling up through the gaps in the rotted roof. The 6 women lay close together, their breathing steadier now, yet their eyes still shimmered with light in the darkness. Elias poured water from the canteen, offering it to each of them in turn. They drank as if swallowing life itself, lips cracked, hands trembling. The first voice to break the silence came from Nara, the woman with the black hair. Her neck still bore the red bruises of the noose, but her voice was sharp, steady. "Do not leave us behind. Elias met her gaze. It was not just a plea, it was a command. A will to survive. He gave a small nod, pressed the canteen into her hands, and moved to the next. Kiona, the red-haired one, let out a dry, sandpaper laugh. You know something? Morrison took this land not long after your grandfather died. Anyone who's dared step foot on it since paid the price. And now, here you are. Elias said nothing. He clenched his fists. His silver eyes stayed fixed on the flickering flames. In his mind, a voice whispered, "If you ride away now, you might live. But what kind of life is it? Watching others die and doing nothing." Violet, the quiet one, her eyes deep as old wells, reached inside her torn shirt and pulled out a bundle of blood-stained letters. She laid them gently on the wooden floor, her voice no louder than wind slipping through a door frame. These are what he cannot deny. Letters from Morrison, orders to his men, notes to officials, bribes to the sheriff. Everything. He thought if he killed us, the truth would die too. But these survived. Elias leaned over. The handwriting was crude, the signature sloppy, the ink smudged, but the stench of greed and murder clung to every word. His hands trembled. Blood thundered in his chest. Ahioka, the eldest, carefully draped a ragged blanket over Iolane's small shoulders. Then she turned to Elias, her voice calm, but unshakable. "You cut those ropes. You're not an outsider anymore." In that moment, Elias understood fate had sealed itself. He had not come back to his grandfather's cabin just to find shelter after losing everything. He had come to stand in the center of a battle written long ago. These 6 Apache women were no longer strangers. They were living proof. They were fire that refused to die. And with one stroke of his blade, Elias had tied his destiny to theirs. Outside, the wind howled through the valley, carrying with it a ghostly wail, a warning on the air. Inside the cabin, the fire burned hot in the eyes of Elias and the 6 Apache women. A fateful meeting had just ended, and a storm was gathering on the horizon. That night stretched longer than any other. The wind whispered through the cracks in the boards like 100 ghostly voices. Elias sat near the door, his Winchester resting across his lap, eyes fixed on the fire. Behind him, the 6 Apache women lay huddled around the hearth, their ragged breathing slowly evening out. After a long while, Nara stirred. She pushed herself up, her dark eyes locking with Elias's. "Do you know what you've done?" she asked, her voice hoarse but steady. Elias said nothing. She continued, "By cutting those ropes, you defied Morrison. He may come for your life." Elias slowly raised his gaze. The firelight flickered in his silver-gray eyes, cold as forged steel. "I've already lost everything," he said. "If I lose my life too, so be it. As long as I die knowing I didn't abandon people who needed me." The words settled over the cabin like heavy stone, but also like the first strike of a pickaxe breaking new ground. Ahioka, her silver hair spilling over her shoulders, gave a faint smile. As she tied a bandage over Iolane's wound, she whispered, "A man who puts what is right above his own life is rare." Tala, the strong-shouldered woman, let out a low, rough laugh. "Then maybe you're not as soft as you look. Maybe you can carry the weight of us all." Elias didn't answer. He simply handed her an old, worn dagger, its blade dulled by time. "If that time comes, use this before I fall." In that moment, the firelight danced across their worn faces. No one said another word, but they all understood. An invisible thread now tied them together, not Morrison's rope, but fate's. By dawn, the cry of wild hens echoed from the hills. Elias stood and stepped onto the porch. The sky was turning ash-gray. A blanket of mist draped the valley. On the gatepost, dried blood still marked where the 6 women had hung, now glowing faintly red beneath the early fog. Elias gripped the strap of his rifle. In his chest stirred a weighty pride, heavy but righteous. Inside the old cabin, 6 pairs of eyes watched the silhouette of the man standing in the gray light. Once a stranger, Elias was becoming something more. A pillar, a survivor. And they women once broken were becoming allies, ready to stand with him. "I'm truly grateful to have you here." If this story brought back old memories of red dust evenings and hoofbeats echoing through your chest, go ahead and subscribe to my channel so we can sit together again tomorrow, and I'll share with you another tale from the Wild West. A thick morning fog blanketed the valley. The world outside seemed swallowed in a cloud of white smoke. Elias sat on the porch steps, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, his Winchester leaning against the wall beside him. From inside the cabin came soft coughs, the shuffle of footsteps, then silence again. The 6 Apache women were still weak, but the fire in their eyes burned brighter than it had the night before. Elias knew this peace would not last long. Silence always came before the storm, and sure enough, the mule reared up, letting out a loud, uneasy whinny. Its ears perked toward the dusty red trail. Elias set his cup down. His silver-gray eyes narrowed. Then came the sound, a low thunder at first, hoofbeats rolling through the fog, sparse at first, then growing louder, faster, heavier. A force was coming. Inside the cabin, Nara rose swiftly. Her black eyes turned sharp as ice. "He knows," she said. "Morrison knows we're still alive." Kiona clenched her jaw so tight her lip bled from the pressure. "We do not have many choices. We can die in this cabin, or turn it into his grave." Elias stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over each of them. No speeches, no ceremony. He opened his grandfather's old chest. Inside were a few worn rifles, scattered bullets, a hunting knife, and an old Apache bow hung since wartime. He handed them out, one by one. Ruby took the Colt, her hands trembling but her eyes fierce. Tala tucked the knife into her belt, gripping the hilt like she meant to snap bone with it. Violet claimed the bow. Pulling the string taut, it let out a sharp, tense twang like fate about to snap. Ahioka quietly loaded a battered musket, her face solemn as a mother shielding her children. Aylin trembled, but Elias gently placed a small knife in her hand and whispered, "Do not be afraid. Hold on to it." In that moment, the old cabin became a fortress. Every wooden wall, every window crack turned into a firing slit. The fire in the hearth flared high, lighting the faces of 7 people ready to stand against a pack of wolves. Outside, the hoofbeats drew closer, shaking the earth. Then came the glow of torches through the mist, lighting twisted, brutal faces. Laughter and shouts echoed like the song of death. Morrison had not come with a handful of thugs, he had brought an army, armed to the teeth, surrounding the cabin on 3 sides. Elias drew a deep breath. His voice was rough, but steady. "This is no longer an abandoned home. This is a stronghold. If we fall, then we fall as free people." Their eyes met, fierce and silent. The heavy breaths of 7 hearts beat in time, with the pounding hooves outside. Every second stretched tight as wire. The cabin door rattled under the pressure. The storm had arrived. The pounding of hooves shook the ground. Over 24 of Morrison's riders surrounded the cabin, torches blazing, casting flickering light over savage faces. Morrison sat tall atop a black horse, his long coat flaring in the wind, his eyes gleaming with the arrogance of a man who believed he held the law in his hands. "Ward." His voice rang out like a judge pronouncing sentence. "Hand them over. This cabin isn't yours. You cut them down last night, what? You got a death wish?" Elias stood firm on the porch, Winchester in hand. His voice was rough, but solid as stone. "This cabin belonged to my grandfather. His blood still soaks the wood. If you want it, Morrison, you'll have to step over my body." Mocking laughter erupted. Then a gunshot ripped through the air. The bullet slammed into the wooden post inches from Elias's head. The battle had begun. Gunfire roared. The cabin shook under the barrage. Windows shattered, splinters flew. Ruby screamed and fired, dropping a man scrambling onto the porch. Tala roared, slashing down another as he burst through the door. Aylin trembled, but when a shadow lunged at her, she drove her knife into his arm. It was enough. Elias spun and shot the man down. Violet crouched in the shadows, silent, steady. Her bow creaked, then snapped. The arrow struck a man dead in the chest. He fell without a sound. Ahioka, despite her age, calmly loaded the old musket. She fired. The blast echoed like thunder. A rider toppled from his horse, crashing to the ground. Morrison cracked his whip, shouting for his men to press forward. Torches hurled onto the cabin's roof. Smoke curled thick into the sky. The whole house groaned, as if ready to become a bonfire. Elias hit the floor, reloading round after round. Each shot found its mark, but a bullet grazed his shoulder. Hot blood soaked his shirt. Kiona rushed in, fired twice with her Colt, then pulled Elias back to his feet. Her eyes blazed, red hair wild in the firelight, like flame itself. Screams, Horses shrieking. Gunfire like war drums. The tiny cabin was now the eye of a storm made of blood and flame. Though each fought like a starving wolf, they were tiring. Ammo was running low. The wooden walls were riddled with holes. Smoke was choking the air. Morrison rode closer, his voice booming through the chaos. "You're nothing but insects. Your deaths will remind this land who holds the power." Elias dropped to his knees on the porch, clutching his Winchester, 3 bullets left. Sweat and blood streamed down his face. His vision blurred, but his spirit held firm. Inside the cabin, 6 pairs of eyes locked onto him. Not one flinched. Smoke poured in. Fire licked the roof. And in that moment it felt as if the whole world held its breath, waiting to see if death would consume them all. The cabin burned like a torch in the night. Ammunition nearly gone. Smoke choking every breath. Elias and the 6 Apache women pressed close together. Each breath was ragged. Each heartbeat felt like the last. Morrison circled on horseback, his cold laughter echoing in the smoke and flame. "You think you can stand against me?" he bellowed. "After tonight, no one in this town will dare defy me again." Elias pushed off the floor, trying to rise. Blood blurred his vision, but his gaze was sharp as a blade. He raised his Winchester, pulled the trigger. Boom! One man fell backward off his horse, but that was just one of dozens tightening the noose. Then, just as despair set in, the sound of a war horn pierced the night. It rang across the hills like thunder. A second later, the ground trembled with the pounding of hooves. From the edge of the valley, hundreds of Apache riders appeared. Feathers danced in their hair, spears and bows raised high. Their battle cries echoed through the mountains, shaking the heavens. The cavalry stormed down the slope like a tidal wave. Flaming arrows flew, striking Morrison's ranks. His men screamed, falling, breaking ranks, scattering. Through fire and smoke, the Apache surged forward like a flood. Nara leapt to her feet, voice cracking with emotion. "Our people. The tribe has come." Kiona shouted and fired her last Colt round, laughing with smoke-blackened joy. Tala lunged, driving her knife into a retreating soldier. Violet, hidden in shadow, loosed her final arrow. It struck square between the shoulders of a fleeing traitor. Morrison's face went pale. He pulled his horse back, screaming, "Hold the line. Do not let these savages wipe you out." But his men were broken. The Apache roared louder. Spears flashed in the firelight. Horses screamed. Men fell. The entire valley became a battlefield bathed in red. A massive Apache warrior galloped to the cabin and leapt down. His eyes burned bright, his voice rolled like thunder. "Ward, you saved the daughter of our people. You are a hero to us." Elias stood tall, blood dripping from his wound, but his stance unshaken. He gave a firm nod, gripping his Winchester tighter. In the thunder of hooves and the cries of war, he understood. This was no longer just his fight. Morrison was thrown from his horse, bound tight in the Apache circle. His face twisted in hatred, but his eyes showed fear. For the first time, the name Morrison trembled before true justice. The cabin still burned, but in that glow, Elias and the 6 Apache women stood side by side, backs to one another, watching as the storm turned in their favor. The darkness had been torn open, and through it, the first light of dawn broke over the mountains. The battle ended just as the sun crested over the mountains. Morning light poured into the valley, shining through the black smoke rising from the scorched roof of the cabin. Morrison knelt in the center of the Apache circle, his hands tied tightly behind his back. His face was smudged with soot, his eyes still wide, but the arrogant gleam was gone, replaced by torn, empty despair. Violet stepped forward, a bundle of wrinkled letters in her hand once hidden beneath the rags of her shirt. She tossed them at Morrison's feet. Smudged ink and jagged lines exposed his crimes. Bribes to officials. Orders to hang 6 innocent Apache women. Payments to the sheriff. Morrison screamed. His voice cracked and desperate. "They're fake. Burn them. Do not believe those filthy scraps of paper." But no one listened anymore. Nara stepped forward, picking up one of the letters. Her voice rang out like a verdict. "This is your signature, Morrison. You wrote the death sentences of innocent people with your own hand. And today, justice has written yours." Elias stood near the porch of the half-burned cabin, blood still seeping from his shoulder, his silver-gray eyes cold and clear. He said nothing. He just watched as Morrison was dragged away, his angry screams fading beneath the sound of retreating hooves. In that moment, the Apache chief approached. He placed a firm hand on Elias's shoulder, his voice deep and steady like the mountain itself. "You saved the daughter of our tribe. From this day on, you are our brother. Anyone who dares harm you declares war on all of us." Elias bowed his head, his calloused hand gripping the Winchester tighter. He had never expected that, through loss and ruin, he would find a new family people who had stood beside him through fire and fury. 3 days later, the cabin was rebuilt. The scorched wood replaced with fresh planks. Elias and the 6 women hammered boards, raising the gate where death once hung. Every nail drove out the past. Every strike carved new hope. Island planted seeds in the soil outside the porch. Tala led the horses to graze. Kiona, still wearing her fierce smirk, practiced her aim 1 bullet at a time. Ahioka kept the food ledgers with quiet focus. Wian, in silence, transcribed the letters into clean copies to be sent out as testimony. And Nara, her dark eyes burning bright, stood beside Elias every time the sunset fell over the valley. One night, around the fire, Elias looked around. His voice was low, rough, like old timber cracking in the heat. "I thought I inherited just an old cabin, but what I truly inherited was a family, a home." No one replied. Only Nara rested her hand gently over his, her eyes shining in the firelight. Outside, the silver moon hung over the cabin. It was no longer a symbol of death, but a fortress of justice and hope. Out here in the West, land could change hands, laws could be twisted, but justice belonged to those who stood together till the end. My dear friends, guns may break, but courage never runs dry. I believe the most precious thing we inherit is not land, but the choice to stand tall for what is right, even when the storm comes. I hope you all live a happy, joyful life. I love every one of you, my cherished audience. Let me know how you felt about this story in the comments. Type Ina if you enjoyed it. And do not forget to subscribe for more gripping stories from the Wild West.